Are we good? Lauren, do you want to try your mic?
Can you hear me? Oh, yes.
Good.
Yes, this is working.
So we'll start. This has been a long week with a bunch of talks, and I think this is one of the coolest ones. We met Lauren about a year ago, right?
Yep.
When we were up in California, and everybody that was there actually raved about talking to her and exploring a little bit more on the best practices on B2B marketing and what she's done. She has a long experience being a VP of marketing in 2 or 3 companies, and then CMO at Box, and now is doing customer. So there is a lot of content for you to explore. It's going to get way more interesting if you ask questions. I'm putting her on the spotlight and in the ring of fire here. But she has a presentation. She will kick it off, but please ask. If you need help with the English, no worries, raise your hand. Somebody's going to give you a mic and help you out with the English if needed.
Perfect.
Take it.
Bom dia, desculpe, não falo português. That's all I got, but I like to try. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm going to see if I can use this, maybe. Yes. So quick agenda. We've got about an hour and a half. I have a ton of content. Good things to know about me. This is my first time in Brazil, so bear with me as much as possible. I live in California. I'm originally from New York City. I have a terrible habit of interrupting people all the time. I kind of anticipate everybody does the same thing to me. I have a lot of content to talk through and go through. I don't expect to get through all of it. This is really about the people in the room or on the in the open airspace and on the live stream. So if you have questions or want to dig in on anything, please raise your hand and jump in. So quick agenda. I'll give you 30 seconds about me, why I'm here, and we have this broken into 3 sections. So this is all about how do you build a B2B marketing strategy. It's going to start with what is the foundation, what are the most important things you need. If you don't do anything else, make sure this is set up. We'll talk about how to build this demand funnel, which is really how do you acquire customers, what do you need to do. And then if we have time, I'll go through what to do after they become a customer. Sounds good? Awesome. Little bit about me. So I'm Lauren Vaccarello. Quick overview. I've been doing B2B marketing for 15 or 16 years. I used to run digital at Salesforce. I ran global marketing at a company called AdRoll, which is a marketing technology company, and I ran marketing at Box and then also started a customer engagement program. I wrote a couple of books on online marketing. My best friend likes to remind me anytime her daughter has trouble falling asleep, just pulls out one of the books, the kid goes right to bed. So that is my recommendation for all of you for those books. And then I also teach a digital marketing master's class. They're going to be launching an online version of it next year, but it's a really interesting organization. All right, that's everything about me. So we're going to start with the foundation. So when you're thinking about how to build a digital marketing strategy, what are the most important things? What are the first steps to do? Before you do anything, you need to decide who you're selling to. I've worked with bigger companies. I've done a lot of advisory work through GrowthX and then working with some of the Redpoint Ventures companies. This happens all the time. You're really excited. You have a new product. You have a new business, and you just want to jump in and sell. Before you just jump in and sell, before you hire that acquisition person, before you start running ads and trying to acquire customers, take that step back and figure out who your customer actually is and who your target audience is. It is so easy to get excited and to skip this step. So when I say who is your ideal customer, I'm a pacer, so I'm going to walk around a little bit. I think the camera's going to hate me for that. So we're thinking about who your ideal customer is. Who is your ultimate buyer? When you start to think about this, think about what are the attributes that make someone the right customer. Since you're selling to other businesses, think about questions like, what vertical are they in? Does your product work better for people in the retail space, people in manufacturing, people in agriculture? Does it work better for the media industry? So take a little bit of time to run through that. Is there a specific company size that your product works better for? Is your product better for a small business? Is it better for enterprise? Is the person that you're selling to, are they in IT? Are they in marketing? Are they in sales? Spend time defining that. And then start to think about what are the key buying triggers. I have this great analogy from a friend of mine who runs product. And she says, whenever you're building a product, you need to think about what are these buying triggers. And the analogy that she uses is, does your product solve a hair on fire problem? And she's like, no, literally. If your hair was actually on fire, does the fact that you haven't done your laundry, you need to go pick up your kids, your brick to solve that problem rather than doing anything else in their life? So that's going to be one of your buying triggers when you start to think about it. I'm going to move this over here. And another thing that we all forget to think about is who don't we sell to? So just as important as who you sell to is who you don't sell to. And if you're a newer company, you just want to get as many customers as possible, and you're willing to take revenue from as many companies. Exactly who is going to be the customer we focus on. So we said we're going to sell to senior level IT people. We have enough people in marketing to focus on small businesses and also to focus on the enterprise. We do really well in highly regulated verticals. Here's the countries we're going to focus in. So we did that. After you have that, the next important step is, what do you say to these people? What is the right messaging? And I'll make sure everyone here gets these slides. This is literally the same outline for a messaging strategy that I've used at Salesforce, that we use at Fox, that we've used at AdRoll. It's really, really simple, and it's really clear. And it's, first thing, how would you describe your ideal customer? Make sure you have this on one sheet of paper. What attributes make them an ideal account? Why are they your ideal customer? Is it because they're a certain company size, they have a certain amount of revenue, they're in a certain vertical? Go back to those key buying triggers. Why do they need your product? Not in general. Why do they need your product right now, today? Why don't they buy from you? If you are starting a brand new space, a brand new category, or if you're going after an incumbent, there's a reason people haven't bought from you yet. Figure out why they don't buy from you today and start to write it out. And then you can actually start putting down, what are your value props? What makes your product different? What makes your product special? What makes your product actually interesting for someone else to want to buy? A good rule of thumb is you get 3. People can't hold a lot of information in their head, and you have 100 reasons why your product is the best possible product out there. No one cares. They're going to care about, this is who I am, this is the problem I'm trying to solve. Tell me exactly the benefit of your product to me. Once I know what that benefit is, that's going to get turned into your 3 value propositions. Maybe you can get 5. Really try to keep it to 3. And as your company evolves, your product evolves, your marketing strategy evolves, you can change this over time. It doesn't have to be the same thing for the rest of time. It could be something that gets reevaluated every 6 to 12 months. That is a little bit of feedback. So write out that value proposition. Have some customer proof points. So this is why your product is great. Here's the 3 things that make you differentiated. For Box, we have some of the best security out there. You can have self-regulating documents. It's amazing. What customers do this? So it's not just you talking about it. Here's customers that do this. Here's goals. I think I'm echoing. Is figure out what you're trying to accomplish. Since this is a B2B sale, I know this is the marketing strategy. This is marketing strategy. We can't be successful without the sales organization. Does anyone not have to work with the sales team and get to do B2B marketing with no sales team? Okay, I didn't think so. I've always had to work with the sales organization. The success of your marketing strategy is highly dependent on your sales organization. So building that really, really deep partnership with them is going to not only make your marketing program more successful, it's going to make your business more successful. So here's a couple of things that I've done in the past to help line this up. So when we start to figure out what are our targets for the year, one of the best analogies that I've ever heard that I tend to steal and pretend I came up with this, I'm going to say that this is my analogy because the person's not here. When you're setting marketing goals, especially as B2B, we're setting marketing goals. the thing that I always say, slash what I stole from someone else, is your marketing goal should be something you can buy a beer with. Your marketing goal isn't traffic to the website. Your marketing goal isn't how many leads you're generating. It is pipeline, it's ARR, it's revenue for your business. So when you're thinking, what should my marketing goal be of my marketing strategy? Can I buy a beer with this? If you can, great. If you can't, maybe reassess. So once you figure out as a business, this is what we're trying to drive, sit down with sales and figure out what are your revenue goals and what are your pipeline goals. So how do you determine targets? Super unsexy stuff of B2B marketing that I highly enjoy is you're sitting to determine targets. If you want to generate, I'm trying to think what Box's revenue is. Say you need to generate $10 million of revenue a quarter. How much of that revenue comes from new customers? How much comes from existing customers? Does it all come from Brazil? Does it come from Brazil plus other countries? In fact, where in Brazil is that revenue coming from? Is it coming from different regions in Brazil? Start to get really specific. If you have an industry-specific solution, do you want to set targets by industry? If you're doing region, you may not want to do region and industry at the same time. It gets really complicated. Try to keep your axes as limited as possible. If you have multiple products, figure out, do you need to set revenue targets by product? And next is, I'm going to stay over here because I am not allowed to walk. This is very difficult as a pacer. Is figure out who's responsible. So there's this concept called the Four Horsemen. There's a couple of articles on it. It's very apocalyptic, but we used to use it at Salesforce. And it is, what are the 4 pillars of driving revenue for a business? And we came up with this, I think we did, and it was inside sales, field sales, alliances, and marketing. So these are the 4 parts of an organization that are responsible for driving revenue. So as you come up with, this is what our goals are as a business, whose responsibility is it to drive this pipeline and this revenue? This is a really general rule of thumb. It's going to vary for every single company. But depending on who your target audience is, if you're selling to small businesses, if you're selling to sort of a mid-market, or if you're selling to enterprise, marketing may be responsible for more or less revenue. If you're selling to the enterprise, it's probably going to come from the sales organization and marketing is going to support. If you are a heavy small business play, pipeline and revenue is probably going to be driven by marketing. So this will start to get you set up for that. Does this make sense so far? So this is, I need to stop turning because this is very loud. Sort of basic foundations, yes? Sure, I asked a little bit more about what the Four Horsemen are. So it's the inside sales organization. So inside sales and field sales. So inside sales are going to be your SDRs, your people picking up the phone. A lot of times they'll get marketing leads. They may be your outside sales rep, and field sales are your AEs. So is it your account executive driven revenue? Is it your like junior seller driven revenue? And then alliances is channel, business development, your ISV partners kind of all bundled into this alliances group. There's an argument right now, debate on what's the role of a customer success organization, and do they also need to play a strong role in this? I completely think they do, having sat in post-sales, because the bigger your business gets, if you are a recurring revenue business, the bigger your business gets, the less and less of your revenue will come from net new customers, and they'll end up coming more and more from existing customers. And once you get that scale, your customer success org will control the bulk of your business, and they need to have a degree of accountability for that. That is a different rant and conversation. We're going to switch gears to building the demand funnel. So you've done a great job. You know who your customer is. You've got your messaging nailed. You've set the goals for the marketing department. You're aligned with the sales organization. Now, how do you actually do the things that make this happen? First thing to do is, how do you think holistically? So when I start to think about how do you actually execute a lot of these strategies, it is really easy to just run and say, I'll create this Facebook ad, I'll create this email, I'll create this one-sheeter, and you do everything independently, you get more bang from your buck when everything starts to work together. And you'll hear people talk about how do you build an integrated marketing campaign. What that really is tying your messaging, your creative, your landing page together into one cohesive story. It actually is a lot easier when you do this. So you go back to the beginning, you have that messaging doc, and you say, here's my messaging doc, here's my 3 benefits, this is who my target audience is. Whoever's running demand gen, you give them that doc and say, how do I find these people? Where does this target audience live? Tell me every single place these people live. Give me a creative angle to get these 3 benefits across. And now let's start building ebooks or commissioning white papers or writing ads or emails that all tie to this. So you're not creating new content every single time. It all comes from the same sheet of paper. And you get that 1 + 1 = 3 effect where everything starts to become a force multiplier. You want to keep consistent as much as possible. People will see your ads and interact with your brand multiple times. You don't want to make them think if they read an email and they go to your website, if it's completely different, they're not going to understand. It's going to be too hard for people to figure out what you do. They'll go somewhere else. No one has an attention span. So how this works across the funnel, I don't know if anyone can see all of the things that are in here. So as you think about how, so super easy, you go into Google. 100 years ago when it was Salesforce versus Oracle, it is anytime there's an article written about Oracle, I want to make sure a Salesforce ad shows up. Anytime there's an article written about one of your competitors, it's not a guarantee, but I want to make sure I'm always bidding on content about my competitors, so that if someone's reading content about a competitor, they automatically see me and I start seeping into their psyche. You can also start doing more keyword targeting around specific keywords around your brand. This isn't going to be your driving demand that's going to convert into a lead or a sale today. This is how do I make sure when someone is in that research phase, in that top of the funnel phase, they're still seeing me, they're becoming more and more exposed to my brand. There's also something called CRM retargeting. So if you export your CRM list, you can take that information, you can now upload it into Google to build a custom audience, you can upload it into Facebook to build a custom audience, and you could also upload it into companies like AdRoll to build a CRM retargeting campaign. So you export the information, all of the email addresses of who your prospects are, who your potential customers are. You upload that, they remove all personally identifiable information, and then you could literally start advertising to a specific group of people. So it'll be a way so that your potential audience just assumes that you are everywhere, even though you're really just everywhere to them. Because we don't need to have giant TV ads, we just need to get in front of that exact right person. So a good example of how we did this, which I still use this example, this is a much older campaign, but it's one of my favorites. When was this? 6 years ago. Years ago, Salesforce had sponsored the Oracle User Conference. This is back in San Francisco. I'm going to do a quick culturally appropriate question. When I talk about Salesforce, is people know who I'm talking? Okay, just double checking. It'd be really strange if I was talking about this and no one knew what I was talking about. Salesforce was sponsoring the Oracle conference. Biggest competitor at the time. We have the main sponsorship. The CEO of Salesforce is going to do the keynote. We have no idea. Everyone wants money, so they took our money. The day before at about 4:30, and the keynote's at 10 o'clock the next morning, we get an email saying the keynote's been canceled. And you're not having it. Actually, it got moved into the week after the conference. So in Salesforce fashion, we were not going to take this, sitting down. Mark Benioff tweets, we're still having a keynote, we're having it somewhere else. So the entire company and the entire marketing team goes, okay, we have to figure this out. So we called every restaurant nearby the conference center and said, can you get a space? We booked out a restaurant that morning, was like, perfect. We're going to have the keynote there. We're going to bring in cameras. We're going to live stream the whole thing. We're making the whole thing up as we go along. because the CEO says we're doing this. So we have the event plan, we're going to live stream the whole thing. We go to the all-night copy store, we get giant signs made, we have employees protesting outside, we have this huge physical presence, and it's this complete integration of what are we going to do. There's more press talking about our ancillary guerrilla event than there was about the actual conference. So Salesforce got a bigger kind of uptick in benefit. And I was running the digital team at the time, and we we could have easily said, well, you know what, this is a physical event. We don't have a lot to do with this. And we said, oh, screw that. We want to get in on this. And what can we do? So we took this whole idea of how can we be everywhere where our competitors are. And this is the time that our competitors are trying to make a lot of noise. So we said, I bet we can do this faster. And in an hour, we wrote new ads, got them approved, bid on every single Oracle keyword, everything that was related to open world, but just in the Bay Area, and then everything related to their conference globally, on Google, on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and then there's this concept of a geofence. So if you're in a physical location, you can bid advertising in a physical location. In a zip code, you drop a pin in a certain radius. So we said, if you're at the conference, we literally want to surround all of your advertising during that day. We had zero budget to do it. We turned everything on. We went to the woman who ran PR with a literal printed piece of paper and said, can you approve this? We just wrote this and made this up. We're fine. We're not going to get in trouble. We're going to go and do this. And with no real designers, no permission, and in about an hour, we digitally basically enveloped the entire Oracle Open World conference and had articles written about why is Salesforce literally everywhere around Open World. And it was because if you've got a clear direction and a clear mission and a clear enemy, and if you ever have a chance to have a clear enemy, it helps unite a marketing team very quickly. Put together this, and the whole thing probably cost us $10,000, which may seem like a lot of money, but in terms of Salesforce to spend $10,000 that I didn't have to spend, no one said a word to me. And it's how do you start to build that muscle within your organization. So I always get a kick out of that story as how do you become outsized and do it very, very effectively. We're going to caveat from driving awareness a little, and every single one of those tactics you can actually use when you are running your marketing campaigns, when you're building awareness for whatever you're doing. Sometimes it's just fun to do things like that. How many people sell to larger businesses? Okay. Then for the people who don't, this may be less relevant to you. So when we talked about Box has more than 80,000 customers, 66% of the Fortune 500. One of the things that we had to do there that's very different is you can't use the same execution when you're marketing to a small business that you use when you're marketing to GE. You need to do different things. You need volume-based versus high-touch. So one of the things that we did is we built out a very different high-touch strategy when going after the enterprise. So it was high-touch, highly targeted, and we had this concept of account-based everything. And when we're thinking about account-based everything, it is exactly not what are the personas we're going after, but what are the companies we're going after. So the marketing team, again, sat down with the sales organization and said, who are the most important customers for us? What are the accounts that we've always wanted to get into? And let's come up with a plan across the sales organization and the marketing organization for these are the accounts we're going to go after. It's not a sales credit, it's not a marketing credit, it's how many of these deals can we land? How we started to execute against that was a lot of field marketing events, a lot of account-based marketing, everything from what can I do from a profiling perspective, what can I do from a scoring perspective, how can marketing start to discover intent? And then how do I make sure sales is really, really well enabled? So marketing isn't just driving new leads, but marketing is training the entire sales organization on what to sell, how to sell them. Here's your enablement materials. Here's all of your references. So as we're starting to build out the account-based marketing program, we had sort of 4 key plays. One was, what are we going to do for net new customers? And that's going to be things like account profiling, digital targeting. We did a lot of appointment setting. One of the things that we found when working with the sales organization is there's always the marketing and sales like to make fun of each other a lot. We had trouble getting the business development reps, the people that are affiliated with the sellers who are supposed to pick up the phone and cold call. We couldn't get them to call all of our accounts. So we said, you know what, marketing will handle it. So we hired an outsourced agency to do a lot of the appointment setting for us. And we'd pay $500 to get an in-person meeting with a director or a VP at a 10,000 person company. And for the $500 a meeting, it was well worth it every time because these were going to be multi-million-dollar deals that the sales team just couldn't crack into the accounts. So we said, if we build really holistic plays for each of these customers, we'll cover the upfront cost because if this can pull in a multi-million-dollar deal, it is worth spending that much money on each account. Then we started to say, well, what are the sort of land and expand deals? So where do we have small pilots with companies? How do we make a small pilot into a much, much larger deal, and had specific strategies around that? And then if we had customers that were also really, really low deployment, what can we do to drive engagement with them as well? Something that's really relevant more on the small, when you're selling to small businesses, but for everybody. Oh, sure. Oh, fantastic. And this is my text messages as well. So I'm just going to close those. Skip. So this is from my trip to Africa. It was great. I can get this over there. Okay. Perfect. All right. I'm glad you said something. I would have never looked behind me to know that we are no longer on this. Okay. Trial. Perfect. Okay. Crisis averted. All right. So I'm going to do a small caveat of your website is the most important asset that your entire marketing department has, potentially the most important asset that your entire company has. The caveat of that is if you are Uber, if you're Calm, if you're your company and your product is your app, your website is probably less important. So if your company is your app, if your product is an app, your website probably is less important. You probably can tune out of me telling you how important your website is. So that is the exception. If your product is not a mobile application and your product is basically anything else, so if you are not an Uber or something similar, then pay attention to this part. So one of the things I've seen at the last 3 companies that I worked at, you assume a web-first company has a website that is easy to make changes on and is easy to optimize. Literally the last 3 jobs I had to take the website away from engineering and bring it into the marketing department because I couldn't update logos on the website without logging a Jira ticket and getting in the engineering queue. So if you can update your website and marketing has control of the website, you are in a better place than I was when I joined every startup that I worked for. Like I said, the website is the most important asset you have. You should be thinking about how do you not only tie your messaging into your website, but how do you make sure your website is constantly delivering value to you? So just a couple of quick tips for converting visitors on your website. How are you thinking about testing and optimization for your website? I like this combination of qualitative and quantitative information. So Optimizely or Google Website Optimizer are awesome tools to be able to do A/B tests and split tests. Also check out usertesting.com. It gives you like digital focus groups, so you're not just basically testing different versions or different buttons. User testing will actually give you the qualitative feedback that lets you create smarter experiences to test, so you're not just sitting there coming up with everything yourself. How can you personalize experiences? Everyone talks about personalization. I will tell you a secret about personalization. It's a lot of work. It is a lot of work. You can personalize everything to come up with that amount of content and keep it updated and designed all the time is a lot of work. Adobe has like 30 people doing this that are just focused on this. If you don't have 30 people dedicated full time to completely personalized experiences all day, every day, and keeping them updated, you probably can get away with less. The things I like to do when thinking about a personalization on the website, that you can get a good amount of personalization so it's relevant, but you are not spending an exponential amount of resources on it. I tend to do a split on the websites that I run between SMB and enterprise if I'm selling to both markets. There's a company called Demandbase that does IP targeting and IP lookup. They have about a 20% match rate, so about 20% of the people who come to your website, they can identify what company they're at, what company size. 80% they can't. The 80% that they can't identify because they're small businesses. So that becomes your obvious answer, is if they can't identify it, assume it's a small business, talk to them like they're a small business. If they can identify them, assume they're a large company, talk to them like they're a large company. The other split that I tend to always do is if there are customers who go to your website and prospects who go to your website, have a version of your website, or at least a version of your homepage that's specifically to customers and a version of your homepage that's specifically to prospects. When a prospect comes to your website, you want to educate them, but ultimately you want them to fill out a form, buy your product. If a customer comes to your website, you already know who they are, they've already bought all or part of your core product. Your job is, how do you make sure they're using the product? How do you get them whatever help resources? And then how do you try to sell them more? So if you do those splits, you will get 80% of the personalization work done for a lot less effort. I just never have excess resources, so I will do the most immediate things possible. And one of the most important tips when you're thinking about what are you doing from a conversion optimization standpoint that you'll hear all the time is, how can you reduce form fields? No one wants to fill out a ton of information. This is where I'm going to say testing and finding the balance is really important. If you ask for too little information, your lead quality goes down, and then ultimately your opportunities go down, your pipeline goes down, your revenue goes down. So you're going to have to do a test to figure out where is the balance between too little information and too much information. Couple of things that you can do just to get away with asking for less information. We use hidden fields a lot on forms. So location is important for lead routing. If you know someone's IP address, you know what their location is, and you can fill that on the back end. So you get that information passed into Salesforce, but the people don't have to actually fill that information in. Anytime there's a chance to autofill something, that if someone starts to type in Florianopolis, because I was just there, once they fill it in, if you can start to autofill information, you can start to autofill company names. There's a ton of tools out there that'll do that. And there's data companies that can append missing information in Salesforce. So just because you're asking for less information doesn't mean you're necessarily getting less information. Next thing that often marketers don't pay attention to, but as a B2B marketer, we are ultimately accountable for the ROI of the programs we run and for the revenue that we generate. So the areas where a lot of things tend to fall off, it's easy to say that's not in our control. I was told once, guilty with an excuse is still guilty. That sort of stuck with me. So it is, how can we fix the things that'll affect our performance? So one of them is creating a great trial experience. If you've got a free trial, create a great trial experience. don't let someone who signs up for your free trial go into an empty environment. We made changes inside of Box. We did this at Salesforce of, if you sign up for a free trial at Box, you're not walking into an empty screen. There's folders, there's content in there so you conceptually understand what it is. When I worked at Salesforce, we actually put in, here's 5 sample leads just so you know what it looks like. If someone's never used your product before and they're using a trial, having a little bit of dummy data in there helps. In-app messaging and WalkMe tutorials now are awesome. There's a company called Pendo that I really like that'll do in-app messaging tutorials so that someone goes into your trial. It's the first experience they have with their product. You can't assume they have any idea what to do. And there's tools like Pendo or WalkMe an intercom that'll help show them what to do. What's really important about that is don't let them do anything. Let them do what you want them to do. What are the most important things for them to do that drive product usage, that drive stickiness, that lead to sales? Those are the things your tutorials should walk them through. And then A/B test your onboarding emails. So as you build your lead nurturing program and your onboarding emails for the free trial, pair that up and link that up with what they do inside of the product as much as possible. Because if your onboarding email tells them to upload content and they've already done it, it's kind of a wasted touch point. So think of what's the next step you can push them to. Work with sales to get deals closed. I spend a lot of time with sales, if you can't tell. So how do you work with sales to get the deal closed? So you've done a great job. You figured out who your audience is. You wrote your messaging. You built this integrated campaign. You got a ton of leads. You got them to your website. You converted a ton of leads. Now it's sales' responsibility to close the deal. Well, if sales doesn't close the deal, well, I'm screwed now. So how do we make sure sales knows how to close the deal? A really, really important asset that as marketers we can create that'll work great on the website, work great from an awareness standpoint, work great at events, and be critical for sales is what you can do for customer stories. Your customers may believe you, but they will be more likely to believe other customers. So as someone becomes a customer and you're doing a great job and you're treating them really well, how do you get them to tell the story and tell the story about how they use your product, what successes they've driven, and you start to create these customer stories that you can use as validation. You turn it into a simple slide that the sales team can use during their pitches. You turn it into a one-sheeter. You do webinars with these customers. One thing that we do is we do customer exchange sessions where it's invite only, people have to sign an NDA on it, and we'll put a customer on the phone with 20 other customers and prospects where it is a completely candid conversation from a senior level customer and their peers to talk about what is really happening, what are you really doing? So it takes the idea of a customer reference call and it literally puts it on steroids, and we find them to be incredibly helpful and effective in helping close deals. The caveat of that is they have to be a happy customer because you are giving them carte blanche to say whatever they want to other prospects. So as you're building advocates and you're doing a great job with your product, this is how you take those people, bring them back into the funnel, and help them help you close deals. And then the other thing that is the underrated but always performs, and I don't know if you do them in Brazil, is we'll have a decent amount of field marketing events. And we use field marketing not just to help drive new leads, but we use them to help close deals a lot. And there'll be very different types of events. So if you are ever a buyer and you get invited to a football game or a concert or a nice dinner, it's a field marketing event. Someone is there to close you. Still really nice. And we work with the sales team to identify who are the accounts we're trying to close and how do we give the seller as many opportunities as possible to be in the room with the potential deals they're trying to close. And then that happy customer who did that customer exchange call, we try to grab them and put them in the same room as well. So it'll be a small event where it is the customers we are trying to close, the sellers who are there, and then our happiest prospects to get them all together. So that'll help accelerate deal close for us. Oh, I'm going to get through all the content. It's amazing. So the last thing that is my current rant and soapbox that I stand on is the role of marketing shouldn't end at the sale. I'm going to do a quick caveat. I always prided myself as a marketer as being the kind of marketer that drives business revenue. And I will drive revenue for the company. This is what we're going to do. My goal is to drive sales. This is how we're going to build our strategy. But I just assumed after the deal was closed, you give it to the sales team, my job is done. I created great content, talked to the right people, drove the right leads, sales closed that, we're all happy. I've always, not always, for the last 10 years, have worked for recurring revenue businesses. It's been SaaS. Someone becomes a customer. And we have high retention rates, so they're going to be a customer, and then I'll just run an upsell campaign. The role of marketing is shifting in a lot of ways away from it is just about helping to get that initial deal into our customers have more and more choices now. They can buy your product, and it's easier and easier for all of your customers to switch to somebody else. It is the days of a customer is locked in for 3 years, for 10 years, are gone. And if you market a product that doesn't do what you've told them it does, you sell a product that doesn't do that, they are going to turn, they are going to go somewhere else, and they might not get a chance to do it the first year, but they'll definitely do it the second year. So as marketers, how do we not just think about getting that initial deal, but how do we start to shift our mindset to customer lifetime value and really maximizing that long-term revenue? And again, the longer you're in business, the more of your company's revenue comes from existing customers versus new customers. So this is my sort of rant on how do you maximize customer lifetime value. So I spent a lot of time digging into why do customers leave? We've done this great job, why do customers leave? And I looked at what are the top reasons for the businesses that have access to their data of why customers leave. One of them is it's too expensive. And I sit there going, I don't buy that your product is too expensive because Salesforce is like $300 a seat now. It was $60 a seat when I worked there. It's expensive, but people are still buying it all day, every day. So it's not too expensive. But why are they willing to spend that much money? And when people say it's too expensive, it means they're not getting enough value for what you were charging. And then you say, okay, they're not getting enough value. I believe that's the price because this is what I believe. Well, how are they using my product? And there's ways people can use your product that are simple and easy and get more and more complex. And all of us have product and engineering teams that are building new features, building new functionality, constantly making our product better and better. How many people use Excel? How many people use Excel the same way today that they did 5 years ago? There are people who work full-time every day as engineers building new features and functionality in Excel. Does any of us use any of the new features in Excel? We use it the exact same way we have always used it. That is your product too. When someone buys your product, you are building all of these new features and functionality. For the most part, people are going to use it the same way that they used it when they first bought it, unless we tell them and help them learn about here's all of the new features and functionality. And if they are using your product in the most basic way and it's 3 years later, you're going to be too expensive because they can probably get those same basic features somewhere else. So that was one major realization is if they're saying it's price, it's really value, and dig into why you're having a value issue. And the other piece was literally they're just not using what they bought. And a lot of customers, when they're leaving, if you sell your product by seat, they're not shutting the product down. They're saying, your salesperson gave me this amazing deal to buy 1,000 seats. I really didn't want 1,000 seats. I really wanted 600. Turns out I only used 400. I want to get rid of the other 600, but I'm going to keep that discounted price on my 400 seats. So that's a big reason customers leave is they're just going to get rid of the stuff they're not using. I had to renew a marketing automation contract. I did the exact same thing during renewal. this is what I bought, you upsold me on this, you upsold me on this, that's a piece of crap, I never use that, I'll pay for the core, you're cutting that out, and by the way, I want $100,000 back as a make good for the crap that you sold me. Also, never sell me a product that doesn't do what it tells, because I will be the worst possible person on renewal. And if I'm going to do this, I have to assume every single one of my customers will do the same thing. So we figured this out on why customers churn, why money goes away. So what we decided to figure out how to maximize this whole idea of customer lifetime value. Money doesn't go away. And if a customer is unhappy, your upsell campaign and your cross-sell campaign is not going to work. You can't sell more to a customer that doesn't like you and doesn't use what they bought. It is a horrible sales tactic. It's a failed marketing campaign. So really what we're doing post-sales is getting the customer to use the product that they bought, make them super happy, and then go in and sell them more shit, because I don't work for a nonprofit and we all want to make more money. So how I started to do this. So the first thing that we dug into was there's a high correlation between product usage, customer happiness, and retention. So figure out what are the most important things your customer needs to do with your products. At Salesforce, we had 3 things that every single customer needed to do with our product, that if they did these 3 things, they weren't going anywhere. So we identified, here's the 3 things that every single customer has to do. That was the first thing that the onboarding campaign did. We did the same thing at Box, or what are the 3 most important things that a customer needs to do to make this product sticky? And you can have your customer success team enable that as well. But as marketers, we said, how can we do this at scale? How can I build an in-product experience and email marketing automation experience that takes every single user on this 1-month journey and year-long journey that goes from basic usage, product stickiness, to how do I make sure they use our highly differentiated features, because you can't get that one thing that you use every day anywhere else. And if I can get you to do that one thing that no competitor has, I don't have to worry as much about you leaving, and then I could sell you more stuff. Also pay attention to releases and how you release products to customers so they actually know what you're building. Perfect. And once you have that high degree of product usage, you can start to say what types of companies and what customers are using the product the most, who is using the most differentiated features, and that is now your target list to build an upsell campaign, to build a cross-sell campaign. These are going to be the customers who are most likely to buy more stuff from you, that by going in and saying, you're getting all of this value, here's all of this other product that you can buy, is no longer a hard conversation that is, how am I trying to get more money from you? It's, you're really happy. How do I actually drive more value for you and for your business? And the last thing I will talk about is once you do all of this, happy customers are going to be your best possible resource. Happy customers are going to do exchange session calls. They'll do reference calls for you. When someone says something bad about you on the internet, a happy customer will jump in for you. So how do you proactively build that? So a couple of things that we did to build customer advocacy. This two-way communication is super important. So make sure customers have a place to talk to you where they feel like they are being heard. People use a Net Promoter Score here. Like, I love Net Promoter Score. I also love to see it trended over time. Some customers are just always cranky and are always going to give you a shitty score, but you look at their product usage, they're never going to leave, they're just unhappy. You just need to identify who those customers are. And what we do is we trend a Net Promoter Score over time on a customer basis. So the customer that's always giving you a bad score, if they really drop, then they might actually have a problem. But if they're just always cranky, just accept that some people are just always unhappy. I have specific customers in my head right now when I say that. And other things that we did is we developed this Nps program. And then we started to say, it's great information to have. These customers are happy, these customers aren't happy. Fine. Well, what do you do with that? So we said, if a customer has a poor experience with our support team, your first the first experience you have with a support case is going to be one of the most predictive for how long you're going to be a customer for. And there's a high correlation between NPS around that first, when something goes bad, how your company handles that will leave a very, very specific mark on a customer's head. So if something happens and doesn't go right, we have programs that trigger of this customer who may be a small customer had a bad experience and has a low NPS score. So how do I send an automated email from the head of customer success that says, that is personalized from him, that says, hey, is there something I can do that I can help you with? Or if a customer is really, really happy, what can you do with that customer and how can you enable them? So we built playbooks across detractors and promoters and figured out what we can do to move detractors at least into passive, ideally into the promoter category. One of my favorite tips is at every size company you're at, there are things that you can do that your larger competitor can't do. These are things that don't scale. So if you are if you're a smaller business, you're say below 100 or you're below 100 customers, if you have a really happy customer, you can literally have the CEO send an email. How you do that at scale is you record a video message of the CEO that automatically goes out to certain customers. It's something that we do for when a larger customer renews and is a sort of promoter of ours, we will literally send them like a thank you kit. And we said, you know, what are things that Microsoft can't do? Microsoft is never going to be able to send like a custom thank you kit to larger customers who renew. It just doesn't make sense. I can do that. I can throw some people at that and do something like that. Another thing that we do that larger competitors can't do is we will do, has anyone heard of like Reddit Ask Me Anythings? It's the website Reddit. People go on and can literally ask any question. So we took that concept and we said, I want to get, I don't know, 40, 50 mid-level, I want to get 40, 50 customers, the influencers. I don't want like the CEO, I want the key influencers in 40-ish companies. And I'm going to put them in a room, virtual room, for an hour with the CEO and let them ask him literally anything they want. And it is unscripted, and it's the people who never get exposure to that level of an executive, but they're the influencers, the people that use the product every day, that are the people who have the ability to ruin the relationship or build it within the company. And I said, well, if Satya Nadella at Microsoft is never going to be able to do that, is never going to be able to do these, like, everyone has to have their cameras on so it looks like the Brady Bunch and everyone can see each other. He's never going to be able to do this hour-long session with 40 like mid-level IT people. I can do that. I only need an hour of the CEO's time and I can get that. So we started doing these sessions with him, with the head of product. So at every phase you're at, you can think of what you can do that your larger competitors can't do that is going to provide this exceptional experience for your customers. And if you can figure out how to do those things, then those customers turn into advocates. Then those customers share your content for you, talk to analysts for you, write reviews for you, jump on customer exchange calls for you, and they become some of your biggest marketing assets. So that is everything, and somehow I've made it through time. I had a thank you slide, but apparently my computer doesn't work. So that is everything. We've got 30 minutes for questions. Hopefully that made sense. So, questions? It's a lot of content.
Thanks for all this. I actually got a little bit lost when you mentioned the slide on driving in Japan.
Yes.
The enterprise plays one,
Yes. Yes. Maybe. Just get these all up. So when you're, so when I think about account-based marketing, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can go after net new customers, which is honestly going to be the hardest thing you can do because and that was the first thing that we did at Box was said, who are the customers we have never had any traction with? And let's go after them. Part of it was if we can do this, we'll know the program is working. The other thing that you can do is how do you drive just small deployments so you're not trying to go wall to wall. And the third thing is, what are the customers that already have small deployments that you can upsell? So for net new customers, and it's going to be a little bit different sort of execution for each. So if you were saying, so as an example, the pilot that we did with the sales team, we said, let's identify 300 accounts. And I want to find 300 accounts we've never had success with, but really strategic. They are right company size, right industry, it's the right list, and then I'm going to apply a bunch of data and say, based on buying signals, who looks like they're in market? So I'm not just pulling random companies out of the air, who looks like they're in market? So we identified, here's what the ideal list looks like. Marketing came up with one, sales came up with one, we kind of combined and came up with this 300 list. And then we said, okay, what is marketing's job in this? The first thing that we did was account profiling. So we have 300 companies. They're large enterprises. There's no such thing as one buyer. There's going to be 10, 20, 30 people in the company that are buyers and influencers. So how do I build your full profile for each account? Who looks like the key decision makers? Who are they? What are their contact information? What's all the information for it? For those 300 accounts, how do I drive sort of digital air coverage? So there's a lot of, between LinkedIn, Facebook, Google, AdRoll, you can do a lot of digital targeting to just target those companies. So we literally just targeted those companies and those individuals to show advertising to provide that little bit of awareness and air coverage. Then what was super interesting is when we ran our field marketing events, every one of the field marketers knew these are the cities that these people are located in. Always invite these people to these events. So we have to get every opportunity to get any one of these people to any of our events. We went out and we hired outsourced appointment setters or outsourced sellers that would just smile and dial through the entire company of like, I'll give you $500 if you can get me a meeting with a director. And they were really good at that. And for that, in the beginning, it was 100% marketing led, and it was we were going to set everything up for you, and the second we get an appointment set or we get an in-person meeting set, we're going to kick it over to you, and now it's the sales team's job to take it and kind of run with it. And then marketing would do sort of back-end support, and it was if there's an event in town, we'll make sure they're there, and when you're ready to close, we'll help you with closing events. For just trying to get smaller deployments, similar things with digital targeting and events. It was a lot more sales-led outbound. There was more outbound reps and more calling into them because they weren't necessarily trying to get. Our target audience is going directly through the IT organization, senior IT people. For the small deployments, we let the inside salespeople sort of lead after we got the names, and they were going more after individual departments. So if you go department, you can do a small deployment. It's going to be an easier sell, and then you have to figure out what your upsell campaign is. So we led with that one, and we had a little bit more sort of peer-to-peer outreach. So if the person who's the CMO can buy the product just for her department, and you know what? I can actually call the CMO there and use that. So we use a little bit more peer-to-peer outreach in that one because we weren't going for like $1 million deal. I'm like, just get us a few seats and then we'll see what else we can do. And the third thing, which theoretically is the easiest thing to do, but I've never started with that because I've never started with the easy thing, is you take the customers that already have small deployments. So we call them customer light. So our product works, theoretically, should be for every single person in the company. But a lot of companies will say, we're a 1,000-person company and we bought 100 seats. I'm like, well, you still have 900 other people that can use the product. So part of it is, do you go to customers who their total account value is a percentage of their total addressable market for that company? And then you build programs specifically for that type. It's less account profiling. It's a lot more a customer success led. It's a lot more it's a lot more customer references. You don't need to do quite as much on the digital targeting side. It is more of a relationship led and a little bit less on the sort of marketing led. Thanks. This is yeah. I'm going to try to repeat that. So, what do I suggest for if people are afraid of the product before trying it? Okay. Do you have a free trial? Is there like a trial experience for the product? Okay. Okay. So if someone is hesitant to get into the trial experience or to use the product, part of that is going to be what can you do to establish that establish trust. So things that we've done, if it's a lot of work to get into the trial, if you can do a video demo experience and have a pre-recorded video demo so they see inside of the product, they see what it does. I'd lean heavy on customer references. So it's, here is a customer, or ideally a customer that's like you, that has had a positive experience. And if you can't get them into the trial, the pre-recorded demo, we also do 3 times a week. And it depends on the scale. We'll do live demos that will basically get groups of people and walk them through the product, how everything works, without having to throw them in the product. And you can have a sales engineer or someone in the product organization run through that, and it starts to get them more used to what you have, what the product is, what the product does. And if it's the live demo with other people, it's nice sometimes for them also to hear questions from other people that they may or may not ask. Other questions? We've got an insane amount of content, by the way. About this, anything? Super loud out here. Cool. Yeah.
So we don't do B2B.
Yep.
A lot of
Okay.
here. But one problem we have is that besides finding the customers and convincing them the product is better,
Yeah.
we have an approval process.
You have
An approval process.
Okay.
So the client must be approved to spread it.
okay.
So it's an added complexity that
Yeah.
I find the person, I convince them that product is better, and then I'm not gonna mandatorily approve them. Do you have any idea how we can go around that? People already know that there's the risk they're not gonna be approved.
And you have to approve them.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to try to paraphrase this for everybody. Slightly different example. So more of a B2C sale, he'll get a client in, they'll try the product, they'll want to use the product, but sometimes as the actual business, you will say, I can't sell this to you. So I know you want this, but I can't sell this to you. A couple of things I could say, really specific on the audience targeting. So anytime you're paying money, if there are any key attributes of someone who can't use your product, and maybe it's income level, location, whatever it is on the credit side that says, if you do X, or if you look like, if there's X about you, you can't use this product. Whenever you're buying traffic or spending money to acquire, see if you can put any negative targeting in there to remove some of those people. With that said, some people will just find their way through regardless, whether it's through organic search. What you can do with that is, can you put certain messaging, say, on your website, just to make it really clear that this also has to go through secondary approval. Maybe it's not on your website, maybe it's in the email follow-up, just to start to indicate that. I've got to think about the name of the company. There's some verification, I don't know if this is going to be helpful. There are some verification services now that and I have a friend of mine runs a direct debit company in Europe, and during the approval process or during the go-through process, once you put in your name and your information and you start to fill it out, based on how much risk you have, it will start to add more and more information. So if you look like you are potentially a high-risk customer that you won't go through, I'm going to put up a lot of walls and a lot of friction for you to complete. If you are super low risk and you're like, yes, I want you as a customer, I want to make it as easy as possible. So if there's anything you can do through using data in the back end or pulling in any APIs that say, you are a customer I want, your job is to remove friction. If there's any indication of you might not be a customer I want, it's how do you put up friction? So I would just see if there's any sort of tech solutions you can use on that too. If I can think of the name of the company they use to pull in data, or I can shoot them a note. Oops. Yes.
When you spoke about advertisement,
yeah.
promotion,
yeah.
you mentioned all social media platforms,
Yeah.
except Instagram.
Yes.
Was there any specific reason?
No. So yes, when I talked about social media, I didn't mention Instagram, or were there any specific reasons? There weren't a ton. It works with Facebook. The audiences that I tend to market to just aren't huge on Instagram right now. It's interesting. If I was doing more, say, in Australia, in a slightly different target market, Instagram is amazing. North American IT people aren't quite there yet. There's literally no reason I didn't mention it, other than it just didn't come out. Yes.
And also about the funnel.
Yes.
Do you work a lot with PR companies?
Yes. Yes.
Could you suggest some? Or?
Yes. I've got to think who is good in Brazil. I tend to like smaller PR agencies. Sort of the major PR agencies, there's only going to be a handful of clients that ever have enough budget to get the best people. If you go for a smaller mid-level or a smaller mid-tier company, you can be exciting enough that you get really, really good people, and I've just had better luck for that. I'll talk after and figure out what industry and what the product is. And some agency, like the agency that I love, I can't work with where I work right now because they are the wrong PR agency for selling to IT. They are my favorite PR agency for anything with like MarTech. Yeah.
How much do a company should spend, like to line a client? Do you have a number, a range, or something like a potential client?
Yes.
Right?
Great question. So our question was, how much did you spend to try to land a client? How much is your average deal? Part of it depends on the company and the stage that you're in. I wish there was like $50. If you are in sort of hyper growth stage where you care more about driving growth than profitability, half of what your ACV, half of what your deal size is. So a good example is, so at Box, our pipeline to spend, so for every dollar we spend, we try to drive a minimum of $8 in pipeline, and that's for 1 year. And so the pipeline is for annual contract value. So if I spend $1,000, I have to assume that I'm going to get $8,000 back in return. When I was at Salesforce, we got up to 14 to 1. When you have like a strong brand behind you, it's definitely easier. You get a couple of teeth in there. Don't spend more. Don't spend more than they'd make in a year. Don't spend more than the contract is in a year. The flip side of that are companies like Hotwire, Expedia, all of the travel booking companies are willing to take the loss on all of their first deals, and they're willing to spend $2 for every dollar they make on the first deal because they know they don't make it on your first buy, you make it on everything else. I wish there was like, this is the hard fast. For B2B, I don't ever like to be in the negative. So on your first year, if your average deal is $5,000, pipeline to spend is easier than ARR just because it takes too long. If your average close rate is 25%, So you know if it's $5,000 in pipeline, it's going to be $1,250. Don't spend more than $1,250, which will sound like a ton to whoever is running marketing, whoever the CEO is, and is like, that seems like a huge amount of money. It is, but, and the more the recognizable the brand is, you'll start to see your demand costs coming down. No? No? Yes. He asked if there are any books or blogs that I enjoy. Some. If I'm looking at advertising, I really like Ad Exchanger. It's a lot of like ad tech and what's going on in ad tech. If I want to do anything around SEO, Moz I think is really, really good. It's great SEO content, great content marketing. The work that HubSpot puts out, also really, really good. It's a little bit more on the SMB focused. There's a company, Topo, T-O-P-O, that puts out really interesting reports with regards to a lot of the account-based marketing work. And theoretically, if I actually do this, I'm going to work with them on a benchmark study for post-sales, like customer engagement and what to do after someone becomes a customer and how to maximize customer lifetime value. So that theoretically is coming out in a couple of months. But they're really good for account-based. People really like serious decisions. I don't love them. I think they're too theoretical. It's interesting. They can be a little too theoretical. And there is a group on LinkedIn. It's CMO Council. And if you sign up for the group on LinkedIn, they send you a weekly newsletter with basically anything that's interesting that comes out. So I sort of use them as my aggregator. Like, they'll find anything that's good and send it to me. Huh. Thanks. Oh, and I went to RD Summit in Florianopolis. Cool. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming, for staying for this, for letting me butcher Portuguese at the beginning. And have a good one. Well, thanks.